Authentic Advantage, everyone, where success gets unfiltered and the real stories come out. I'm your host, Angie Tajweedi, and each week I sit down with founders, leaders, executives, and changemakers to explore the challenges they faced, the lessons they learned, and how authenticity became their greatest advantage. Today's guest is a powerhouse in leadership, HR, education, and community impact. From compensation manager to adjunct professor to president of Kern County, SHRM, the list goes on. She's helping shape workplaces and future leaders alike. So today we're talking about leadership, confidence, culture, and why authenticity may be the greatest advantage in business. So with that, today we have Charity Ricks. Thank you so much, Charity, for joining us.
I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I know, me too. I've been sitting here talking with Charity. She has such amazing energy. And well, let's just kick it off. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do. Like, what makes you passionate?
Yeah, so as you mentioned before, I wear a lot of hats. I'm a compensation manager. I'm the president of Kern County SHRM. I sit on the board of Cal SHRM. I'm an adjunct professor. That's something new for this semester. So all of these, roles are near and dear to my heart. I don't even think I could pick a favorite if I tried, but they all make up who I am and all hopefully help contribute to the community as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely does. You're going above and beyond. And like I said, I can feel that passion from you. I guess I want to kick it off. So you and I were talking a little bit about what leadership looks like from your perspective and versus employee perspective. And I want to ask, what does authentic leadership look like when you have to make difficult or unpopular decisions?
Yeah, so I think it's all about, remaining true to yourself. Obviously, we have to be compliant in HR, right? We have to make sure that we're following all the rules and regulations in
Yeah.
California, which is always fun. But, just really making sure that you are doing things fairly, you're building trust with the employees, you're making sure that they feel confident bringing issues to your attention, and you're building that trust from day one, right? And you're continuing that trust. You're making sure that you're checking in on your employees, you're scheduling one on ones, you're doing different things to really build that trust. So that way, when an issue arises, they feel confident bringing it to you and they know that you'll address it thoroughly.
Yeah. So you want to work on more of like the prevention side, right? Like making sure
Yeah,
everything's okay so it doesn't snowball into a problem. Yeah. Absolutely agree
definitely.
with.
The
Yeah.
prevention is easier than the cure, right? Like the cure always takes us so long to, implement. So if you can prevent it and you can build that trust from the beginning, you're going to be in a good
Mhm.
place.
Yes, I love that. And so with that then, how do you build trust quickly with like teams, especially in HR when people may come to you in very vulnerable moments?
Yeah. So what I always try to do is I always try to listen first, right? You're listening to find out what the issue is and how you can help. You're not automatically jumping to a solution. You're saying, hey, tell me what happened. Let's find out more information, you know. And then I always like to ask the employees too, how would you like to see this resolved? I'm not guaranteeing that this is how it's going to be resolved, but how would you like to see this resolved? How would this help you continue doing a good job in your role? And I think building that trust too is just setting the example, right? So if I
Mhm.
think I'm going to be somewhere at a certain time, I'm going to be there. And probably earlier than I say I'm going to be there just to make sure. If they're having some sort of important meeting, I'm going to show up and I'm going to make sure that I support. I'm one of those people, I'm big on, celebrating birthdays and anniversaries and connecting with people. Hey, how's your wife, Lisa? Or, oh, I remember you have a newborn, Sam. That's great. Can you tell me more? And I just think all of that really goes a long way.
I agree with you because we connect with each other as humans when we can be a little bit vulnerable and share a little bit of our personal lives. But can we touch on one thing? I love that you said I always show up on time, if not early, because I always say if you're not early, you're late. Like you should always account for traffic or whatever. I'm like that the same way. But
Yes.
it shows what it shows is like you respect their time, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and I mean, I want people to show up the same way, right? I want them to respect my time. When people show up 30 minutes late, I'm like, okay, now I may have to move a meeting here, or we may have to, you know, shorten our conversation because then I, have something else on the calendar. And I don't want you to feel like you're not valued, but unfortunately, you just showed up a little bit too late. And now we're going to try to do our best to accommodate.
Yeah, especially when everything's managed on Outlook now, right? Like if you're not on calendar, I can't really take you. But I think, respecting time is really important, but you touched on some really great points on building that trust. I love what you do. You don't always see that in HR, right? Especially with some of these bigger companies. A lot of my audience works for some of these big companies where they can't typically get that relationship, right? We're just too spread out. There's too many employees. So it's always nice when you can have that. I mean, you've worked in HR for years.
Yeah.
Why yeah. Why do you think so many workplaces, talk about culture, but they struggle to create that psychological safety?
Well, I mean, I think culture became the popular word, right? Oh, we want to have a great culture. We can't just bring in snacks and have foosball tables and let everyone, leave early for a happy hour. The companies that are doing culture well have learned that it takes work, right? And they need to ask their workforce what they need because they're what they consider to be, helpful. And building that culture might be different than what the CEO or CFO feels like culture is. So I always recommend sending out a survey at least once a year, trying to figure out getting to know your workforce a little bit better. Like what's important to them and how can we implement it? And a lot of times CEOs are like, oh, I don't want to do that because it's going to cost us a bunch of money, right? They're going to ask for crazy things and we don't have millions of dollars. Most of the time, the items that I've seen people put on these surveys are free or cheap, right? Like
Yes.
can we switch out getting, all of these snacks that aren't healthy for healthier snacks? Or can you acknowledge people's birthdays? Like, can we write up their birthdays on the wall? Or can, once a quarter, can we celebrate by getting like some sort of dessert for the whole office? Like, they're fairly simple. Or sometimes it's a matter of, we're not team bonding. Like, how can we take some time to bond? Right. I heard
Yes.
something cool that an office was doing. They're actually shutting down their whole office and taking their staff to see a movie because that's like what the staff identified as what would be fun for team building. I'm like, that's excellent. That is a great way to do it. You close down the office an hour early on a Friday and you go see a movie. Perfect.
Minimal cost.
Yeah.
I really agree with that. I think, we spend the majority of our time at work, whether we admit it or not, right? And it's like this is a second family. And at least that's how I've always viewed it. So I've always been that open book. People who know me know that. But I think connection is so important. And so to your point, those free things, having a group chat, acknowledging, hey, good job. Hey, way to go, right? Like pointing out the positives, not always like we need to do better or we need, we often see that, especially on the sales side of the business,
Yeah.
because numbers speak, but it really doesn't cost much to build culture. And good culture really just comes, in my opinion, through authenticity, just being there for each other, human to human. But I do still see a lot of companies struggle with that connection piece out of fear.
They
So
do.
I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fear is always going to be there, right? And so I always say if you're scared, you should do it anyways if it's important to you. So, as an HR leader, you have a responsibility, right? You have a responsibility to your workers, but you also have a responsibility to the business. And I think balancing that out, you're really representing both sides and you need to do it well. If you're scared and you feel like it's the right risk for your employees, then I will scream it from the rooftops, right? I will send
Yeah.
my CEO a handwritten message if I think that that will work, right? And if I think that the company is doing something that's important for the employees and the employees don't quite understand, then I want to make that clear, right? Is that a town hall where we discuss it? Is that one-on-one where I'm showing up to their, team little huddles to discuss it? Is it trying to figure out, where where the kink in the line is, right? And
Yeah.
talking to those people and getting them on board. But that's all of our responsibility, especially in HR. Like we are responsible. We're the change makers.
I love that. I love that. Yeah, the change makers. I haven't heard that yet. Because again, most people fear HR, right? Like we coming from corporate, that's why I say we always fear HR unless we're onboarding. That's probably the only time that
That's
we're
the
okay
one
with you
that you
guys.
like us.
I'm like, "Okay, yeah, here's my social security, here's everything, but let's not talk until I leave." Hopefully it's on good terms. No, you and I were talking about this earlier. Why do you think that HR is scary? Like, why do you think that is? But also, what would you say to people who are worried or scared to go to HR?
Yeah, so I think that it's not just the employee's responsibility, right? HR needs to be building these relationships. They need to be establishing this trust. I try to check in on employees more than just the first day, right? When I'm hiring you. I try to check in, 30, 60, 90 days and then continuously check in because some companies do a great job 30, 60, 90 days. And then they're like, well, this person works here forever now. We don't need to worry about them, which
Yeah.
not the case, right? We need to worry about everyone and talk with everyone. But I think people get afraid to go to HR because they're like, okay, this lady who sits in her office, she gives me my paycheck, right? She can help with progressive discipline. She hired me. She could potentially work to fire me. I mean, I feel like sometimes that's the vibe that some HR professionals give off, which is really unfortunate. I really try to come across as fair. I really try to come across as, I'm willing to work with you. I'm willing to listen to you. My door is open. Sometimes it might be closed because I'm in a meeting, but hypothetically it's open. Like, let me know
Right.
on. Let's work together to establish that trust. So I would say if you don't already have that relationship with your HR person, try to build it. I mean, they should be, putting in some effort too, but try to build it. Stop by, say, hey, I'd like to bring, X, Y, and Z to your attention. How do you feel about that? Or what do you think about that? And I think your HR professional should really respect you for that.
Okay. So, maybe practicing what I'm hearing is like, practicing building that relationship and then maybe over time you'll overcome that fear.
Yeah.
And this sounds really good for some of these smaller companies, right? Where like I don't know how big your company is, but being able to reach out, you have that option. But let's just say, companies that have, like a HPE, over 100,000 employees, and you wouldn't know how to reach out to. It does become very pragmatic, right? And then like the emails that you talk about that come out, they're usually automated. So you just know people just delete them, right? The check-in emails and here, click a button. How are you doing?
I know. I know. It does sort of seem like that sometimes. So for the larger organizations, you may not have direct contact with your HR, but reach out to your supervisor, to your manager. They're a connection to HR too, and they should have a relationship with HR. So if you do have a concern, if you feel comfortable going to your manager, you should start there. Especially if you work in a larger organization, you can bring that to your manager's attention or supervisor's attention, and they can kind of direct you in the right location. Obviously, if it's something big, they're going to transfer you straight away to HR. If it's something
Yeah.
that, maybe can wait a little bit, they might help make an appointment with HR for you, or they might, act as that mouthpiece between the two parties too.
Yeah. And if you're not comfortable going to your supervisor, you should probably go to HR.
Yes.
On
And
that
vice
note.
versa, right? Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel
So
comfortable going to your supervisor or HR, I mean, I
there's a
question
bigger
if you're in the right organization, right? You might wanna reevaluate if you can.
Yeah. So it'd be good as a whole to practice just overcoming that fear and being able to go to HR without fear. I guess I would challenge anybody who's listening who is feeling like they have a problem and they're too scared to go to HR, overcome the fear. There's a reason you're feeling that way. You got to follow your intuition. And I was talking to you about this, Charity, like I spent years just holding stuff back because I felt like I didn't want to be a problem and I didn't want to, muddy waters, and I thought I'd be a red flag. Um, but HR is there to help you. So fingers
Yeah.
crossed. No, no,
Yeah.
they are. And well, so you mentioned, but we'll move over to the compensation side because you mentioned that earlier. And that's always a fun topic. How can employees advocate for themselves? Well, as a compensation manager, you deal with pain values. So, why do you think so many people struggle to confidently ask for what they're worth?
Yeah. For one, I don't think some people realize what they're worth, right? They have worked in the company, 5+ years. They've done a good job. They've gotten their 3 to 5% raises each year, their merit budget raises, right? And,
Uh-huh.
they're happy with that. But they don't realize that the market has really changed for their position in those 5 years that they've been at that company. So they may actually be worth a lot more. So I always recommend, staying on top of the numbers, knowing your worth. Also, in those 5 years, did you get a new certificate? Did you go to school? Did you add on to your value that maybe your supervisor doesn't know about? All of those things can contribute to the amount of money that you make. So just really knowing your own worth, and also, especially as women, sometimes men are better at it than we are. You've come in at a lower amount because you didn't negotiate your salary. So now you've experienced, you know, not good growth within the role. So again, just staying on top of it, really doing your research. There's a lot of good free resources out there. The Department of Labor site, that there's a lot of good things you can look at that information. Sometimes there's even compensation salaries that you can look at and those sort of things to kind of know what your position is worth. And then negotiate, right? Come to those meetings prepared where you're having your performance review. These are the goals that I set for myself. This is what I accomplished. And do a little bragging. I know sometimes we don't like to brag about ourselves, but this is your moment to shine. I
No.
improved numbers 15%. I brought in X amount of dollars. I hired
Uh-huh.
amount of candidates. The data really speaks for itself too. So if you can come up with those numbers, that's really helpful too.
I think that's great advice. What about those like third party companies? Maybe you can educate us a little bit. I know in the past when I brought this up, I was told, and again, going back to some of these bigger companies, right? Oh, well, we use a third party company. They determine the compensation and it's based on where you live. And there's a cap and there's like these tiers. How does that work?
Yeah. So if your company is doing compensation right, they are probably participating in compensation surveys, hopefully more than one, so they can kind of balance the numbers. I always like to say three is a great number, just so they can kind of look at the numbers. So let's say you are a warehouse supervisor, right? Your warehouse supervisor, we read the job description, we see that you would fit into warehouse supervisor one. So then we would look at the data across the three surveys, kind of combine that together and create a range. Like this is the range that we're now going to say is the warehouse supervisor range, right? Do you fit
Yeah.
into the range? And at one point in time, you may max out of that range, in which case then you want to receive a promotion to the next range. So it kind of changes for you, right? And you're not maxed out anymore. But sometimes, let's say you're warehouse supervisor four, and that's as far as you can go for that company until you become a manager. So now you need to step it up and get that promotion in order to get that additional funds. And compensation
Okay.
surveys are based on your location. They're based on your what you do within the work. And then, the other factors that go in. But companies normally change up the data too. They're not just saying, okay, because this compensation survey says that you're worth $25 an hour, we're going to give you $25 an hour. So you really have to look at the internal equity too. What are other people already making within your organization? The external equity is where you're looking at what other maybe warehouse supervisors are making in that same area. So it really varies. Compensation is pretty hard sometimes. We say it's an art, not a science, because a lot goes into it. And a lot of times the answer we give is, it depends. Well, depends on this, it depends on that. So hopefully that's
Yeah,
all.
well, yeah, no, it is helpful. I mean, speaking of depending on stuff, right? Like, can we get a temporary income lift for Californians who are paying $7 a gallon? Right? It's hard to factor in those things. Like,
It is.
anything can happen, and is it going to be temporary or long term? And yeah. So no, this is very insightful. I appreciate that. So on that, how would you say leaders should think differently about rewarding people beyond just the money?
Yeah. So, I mean, we have something called, you get your base budget, right? Like, so you get paid a certain amount, then you get bonuses, and there's a lot that goes into that. They could be spot bonuses, they could be group bonuses, they could be, whatever that safety bonuses, whatever that depends on. But then beyond there, I think what a lot of employees forget to look at is you're also getting paid essentially, right? Like if you have a 401k and your company matches that, that's extra dollars to you, right? They're helping to pay some of your healthcare premiums, which are crazy right now. And most employers pay quite a bit of the health premiums for employees. So, really, you have to look at overall your compensation package, which goes beyond, the number that you make per hour, or the number you make per year. So, just really factoring in all that information is pretty important too.
Yeah, and I think to your point earlier, leaders, can reward people beyond money. I mean, with just the small things that we don't think about, like you said, the things that we actually want are sometimes just a little bit of,
Yeah.
acknowledgement, or hey, we need just that camaraderie or whatever it is, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's
we
something
need
so small.
a birthday card on our birthday or our anniversary or a team bonding event or something that, really has an impact and maybe doesn't cost that much. But I think leaders can just
Yeah.
approach it as finding out what works best for their team. I always like to ask people like, "Okay, do you like to be celebrated? How do you like to be celebrated? And then
Yeah.
is there anything that's important to you?" So one time I found out an employee loved cake. He loved his birthday and like Rocky Road ice cream was his favorite, right? So on his birthday, I showed up with a big cake and Rocky Road ice cream and, it was the best day ever is what he said. So those little
Yeah, see, it's the little things.
yeah, yeah, and I got them at Costco, so totally affordable, right?
Yeah, I definitely want to challenge people. If you're in a leadership position, start thinking like about the little things. They make such a huge difference, trust me. Or, maybe even trying to think back of a time when you were an employee, right? And you weren't in leadership. What are the things that you wanted? And sometimes we forget as we move up in roles, right? We get busy, we have high demands coming from above, and we kind of just let the small things go. But like you said before, they end up snowballing and later on can turn into bigger issues. So I like that. Um, Now, how do you think an employee could advocate for themselves authentically without being labeled difficult? And I wanted to ask this one earlier, but when we were talking about being scared of HR, and again, people feeling difficult, they're labeled, or I use the word red flag. So, what are your thoughts and advice behind that?
Yeah, so I think if you have, genuine concern, and you have genuine issues, bring those forward in a way that's respectful, right? Hey, I wanted to come talk to you about this issue. This is what's happening. If you have documentation, great. HR always loves documentation. We have a
Yeah.
saying, document, document, document. Um, so, if you can provide some backup resources, but I think just being, respectful, acknowledging, that there is an issue, and you really want to partner with HR to fix it, or you want to partner with your supervisor or manager to fix it or address it. Now, the people that bring up every little thing, I'm annoyed that Susie gets a pink hard hat and I have to wear a yellow one, and those little things that are not authentic, right? Like then I would
Yeah.
you're going to be labeled as a red flag because you're continuously bringing forth issues that don't matter. But if you're bringing forth, genuine concern and you can convey that message, I think that's going to be well received. HR should be very grateful that you're bringing that to their attention.
Interesting that you brought that up because the whole time I've been saying, like, most people are scared to talk to HR, but you are telling me there's another type of person that goes to HR often. So it's not all of us. So
It's
not
not.
everybody. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I can definitely see that. Okay. That clarifies a lot. I think that if you're going in, like you said, genuinely and you have an issue, it's, we shouldn't think to ourselves, we're a burden.
Correct.
Um, and we shouldn't fear retaliation. It's just, I think, unfortunately, a lot of people probably have experienced retaliation in the past. And so once you have that one bad experience, it's really hard to overcome that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing I would say is I always tell people that bring an issue to my door, I always say, thanks for sharing that with me. I think that that can be pretty powerful and something that, all HR professionals could implement too. Thanks for sharing that with me. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. Because then it makes you feel less bad about bringing it to me, right? The other thing that I would share is HR does a pretty good job, I feel like, of not retaliating. Just the managers and supervisors sometimes that don't have the training and don't realize what the retaliation actually looks like. And so it's
Mm,
really our job in HR to train supervisors and managers to say, you can't do that. That's actually retaliation. You can't do that. That's actually
yeah.
against the law. Let's not do that, right? Let's reframe this way.
Yeah. That's illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Um, well, I think you've done a really great job of helping us understand why HR should not be scary. Things we can do to overcome that fear. I did have one last question because you are an adjunct professor, so you also teach younger professionals. I wanted to know what you're seeing. Like, what are they craving most right now? Is it success or stability, work-life balance?
Yeah, so a lot of my students, and I do have a mix of generations, but mostly younger students, junior and senior level, that are taking my management courses. They are really wanting work life balance. They want to get a job, but they still want to be respectful of their time with their families. They still want to make sure they can play their video games or keep up with their hobbies or whatever that might be. So I think as this generation really is entering the workforce, we really need to be mindful of how we set those boundaries. Hey, if it's 5 o'clock, then yes, our culture says, you can clock off, you're done for the night. We have that work life balance. Or, oh, hey, this may not be the fit for you because we really don't have as much work-life balance as we would like. Like, if we need to reach you at 9 PM because there's a safety issue, then we have to reach you at that time. So I think just really telling this next generation, and really communicating what those expectations are will be helpful, because they also are very big on communication. They wanna know what's going on, and they wanna know it from the beginning. So let's share that with them as managers and supervisors in HR.
Yeah, I agree. I think that educating them is going to be key, but they are definitely going to change the way we work in the future, right? And I'm advocate for a work-life balance, so come on, guys. But it has over the years, the each generation comes in and just kind of changes the workforce a bit. So it'll be interesting to see, how it plays out in the next 10 years, how remote work, right? I mean, COVID
Yeah.
really changed that, but we've kind of gone back and how that will evolve. It's definitely ever changing. Well, Charity, I really appreciate you coming on today. This has been so insightful because, like I said, I tried not to talk to HR, but this has been such a pleasant conversation. And I would say to the rest of my audience, don't be scared of HR. They're really there for you. And if I learned anything today, today's conversation is a reminder that again, HR is not scary. You guys wear many hats,
We do.
and success is not, built through titles or talent only, but through integrity and courage and staying true to who you are. So, if
Mhm.
this episode brought you value, share it with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep showing up fully, lead with purpose, and remember, your authenticity is your advantage.